Joe, a lot of the alum, they kind of want to take a step back after they're done and not really get involved with the current team. But how important is it for a coach's standpoint to want these guys to be around the current players and maybe something can kind of rub off on them culture-wise? So
yeah, I think it's great that they're around and so many former great players here today, marking a special occasion. I mean, these are the players that built and established this culture here as far as being a Boston Bruins. So, for us, it's exciting to have them here. It's exciting to see them around, and they just have so much to offer for our guys.
You were daydreaming in Medford about who you were going to be someday. Which players were you pretending to be?
That's a great question. I always loved watching Ray Bourque as a young kid, but I wasn't a defenseman. I was a forward. So I set my sights on different players. I just always liked the way the Bruins played as a kid. They played with passion. They played with emotion. There wasn't one particular player that I singled out growing up in the area. I mean, I had such a large gap of teams that I've watched over the years growing up here, but they always matched the city with their work ethic. They had characters in the room, and it just seemed to blend in great with the city. So, always fun watching them as a kid.
A little part of you still, little Joey Sacco when you're meeting some of these guys.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, you get starstruck still. I've obviously got to know some of the guys over the course of the years. Being out here for 10 years, I've established some relationships with some of the former players, but you never forget who they are and what they meant for the organization.
As a fan, you would have come aboard sort of in that lunch pail group, right? Late 70s, early 80s.
Correct.
Yeah. Do you remember what those games were like and what the atmosphere was?
Yeah, I mean, well, everybody remembers from those days. First of all, being in the old Garden was different. You were right on top of the game back then, and the game was different as well back then. But just like I said before, there's certain things that stick out in your mind as a kid. I do remember the game in New York at Madison Square Garden when all that happened. I also remember, I believe it was 87-88 season when the Bruins ended up beating Montreal for the first time in a long time in a playoff series. And one thing that stood out to me was when Reggie he took off his mask and he was given the arm pump, after he left the crease. So there's certain moments that you always remember as a kid in that era, and you always remember some of those players too.
how would you describe that rivalry between the Bruins and the Canadiens?
Back then?
Just overall.
Well, I mean, it's still it was fierce. I mean, that's the way I would describe it back then. And obviously, the game has changed, but the rivalry is still there. I mean, there's a lot of emotions that go into these games when you play these guys, and they feel the same way about us as we do about them. So, because the part that the game has changed is one thing, but the rivalry still is very intense.